nothing left for me to hate, so I can lay me down, my brothers, on the ground. I bled today until Coyote comes to raise me up and carries me away to go. Leave me, run like you never did. No, believe me, run like you never run before.
Hello, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Scottish Rugby Podcast, brought to you by the Scottish Rugby blog. I am Cammy Black. I'm back after my week's rest, and we're not banned from Facebook, so that's always a bonus. Joining me this evening is 50% of those responsible for not having us banned from Facebook this week. It's Iain Hay.
No, again, I refute that claim, but hello, everyone. Yes, there's Cammy just trying to blame me for everything as per usual.
I know. Well, I like to keep you in line.
You do have that dictatorial streak about you.
That's always. I checked in on you last week, and while you were doing the OnlyFins one as well. 15 minutes in, and you'd got on to. You're on the second row of those.
Yeah, but
those podcasts was like 10 minutes.
Yeah, but see now, me and John don't work in a linear structure. So we were working rounds. It just
like a French back line.
Yeah, it was like Memento. Memento, the team lineup. So.
If you want access to those podcasts, they're called OnlyFins, and they're available to our Patreon subscribers. So what we're doing is we're having a little mini podcast. We're supposed to be a mini podcast. This one was half an hour, where we look at the lineups and kind of preview the game. But you have to sign up to our Patreon for that. So if you go to patreon.com/Scottish Rugby Podcast for £3 a month, you can get access to ad-free versions of this podcast. And
Cammy, I don't know what's wrong with your lighting, but it looks like I'm
looking at
you through a dirty car window.
And there we go. I'm going to tilt. I'll tilt it
there
down.
We go.
I know. I need to pay the window cleaner. But yeah,
one of my windows isn't opening, so I can't clean it properly now. And I'm 3 floors up, so ladders.
How have you been cleaning it? What do you mean you can't open? Like, do you normally kind of like does Rona hang you by the ankles? And
no, that used to be an option. No, they open in the way, but now one of the locks is completely busted on it, so I can't even open it slightly. So yeah, it's a bit of a nightmare. And
could you not get one of those men with the big long brushes? That's what we use.
Well, apparently they used to come round before I'd moved in, renew it here, but somebody dinged paying them, and so they've
didn't come anymore.
Back. I see them like a block up and stuff. I should maybe just ask, but
it leaves your windows streaky, but you don't end up with them clambering all over your house.
True. Yeah, I could be doing a podcast or playing Pro Evo, and then all of a sudden, bang,
big brush.
Well, right in my face.
So if anyone knows any good window cleaners, give Iain a shout. Or maybe you are a window cleaner.
Or if you know any good barbers or hair transplanters, because if you're watching this live, you will see that I have, I've now applied for a role as Eastern European thug number 2 in the next Bond movie.
And what did you use to cut your hair, Iain?
Well, isn't this a handy way to introduce this bit that we have to do? I used one of the new blade that I got sent from Manscaped.
There you go.
Manscaped.com, who do trimmers, which you're meant to use on other parts of your body. But they sent me sent us new blades, and I've used that to trim my head.
So if you would like your downstairs to look as neat and trimmed as Ian's head, then go to manscaped.com/Scottish Rugby and you can get 20% off plus free shipping. They also do nose hair trimmers, which are quite nice actually. They don't pinch, and they do various ointments and oils and stuff for your your gentleman's areas as well.
Last week, I think, because my nose is kind of busted. It doesn't work so good. The boxers are incredible.
They're very comfortable.
Yes. And
I've never tried the bamboo. Are they supposed to be
I'm
bamboo?
not sure, but the wick the sweat away, which is good.
They do the wick the sweat away, and they hold you. They cup you very nicely. It's like, I think I've said earlier on this, but it's like having someone gently cupping your balls all day for you. Not in a sexual way, just in a support way. I would imagine it's what women feel when they say they found a good bra.
That's what it says. It's like ball bras.
Ball bra. That's what it is. So yeah, we're only our current kind of arrangement with Manscaped, because it's a paid partnership, runs out at the end of this month because it's tied in with the Six Nations. It may be expended, it may not be, but if you have been holding back on your 20% discount, then go and have a go with that now. So we have got a lot of news to get through today before we get on to the match itself. The first one is that there's finally going to be a global calendar, Ian, but not for men's rugby, for women's rugby.
Yes, the women's 15 program. Yep. So I've only sort of briefly checked that. I've seen is it 3 tiers?
There are 3 tiers. So Scotland will have to finish in the top 3 of the Six Nations, which they haven't managed to do for 2005 to get in the top tier. So this is going to be a new tournament. So essentially there's a 3-tiered global 15s tournament called WXV. So it'll be women's 15, won't it? Which will see 16 sides from the Northern and Southern Hemisphere face off against each other on an annual basis, apart from World Cup years from 2023 onwards. So you qualify for that based on your finishing position within your annual regional competition. So the Six Nations is one of those. To get in the top tier, you have to finish in the top 3 of the Six Nations. So tier 1, 6 teams played across a cross-pool format at a standalone tournament in one location, which will be determined on a year-by-year basis. Tier 2, again, that's a different location, presumably. So you're looking at on the offside line was saying you're looking at teams from Europe, 4th place team from the cross-regional tournament featuring Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and USA. So it looks like there's going to be other new women's tournaments as well to try and get qualification for as well. So there's also going to be some sort of playoffs and stuff as well. But it's nice to have a global competition. It's supposed to manage game time, but if anything, it looks like an opportunity to give everyone more game time, which is, I think, what's needed in the women's game.
Yeah, the only slight issue we could see arising there is that because, for example, more than half the Scotland's women's team, they're still amateur, so getting time off might be an issue. I don't know if there can be some kind of assurances around compensation for employers or players actually getting paid to participate. That'd be better. I assume that'd fall under World Rugby's remit. And
I think it must. I would imagine it's be down to your individual union as to how they do it, because technically it's professional. They would give. I suppose it's in the men's game, World Rugby would have a responsibility to give money to the lower tier nations to assist them, but they're not going to give money to Scotland as a kind of lower tiered women's nation, because we're not Fiji, we're not the Netherlands when it comes to like finance wise. Yeah,
but then also we're not England or France, who have got much more money. So if they're serious about trying to grow the women's game, which would be mean, this is when I've had arguments with people about this before. People go, "Oh, it's not a good enough product because it's not competitive enough." It's like, right, but if you put more money into it, it becomes more competitive. And then if you expand, with exposure, becomes a bigger fan base, which again bleeds more money into it. So it's cyclical, and it means that, because you look at how Scotland have progressed, getting that draw against France. Fair enough, we get scalped off England, but England scalp pretty much everyone. Especially if you get somebody who's like Emily Scarrett, who is, in my opinion, the best all-round back in the world at the moment. Like, in terms of skill set, she's just unbelievably good. If you can give them a bigger profile, it brings more money into just all of world rugby, not just specifically into the women's game. And that should filter down.
Yeah, because I was kind of having debates on Twitter with people who there was a Twitter poll went out from, I think, a potential sponsor for a women's Lions tour, and they'd said, "Would you watch a women's Lions tour?" Essentially, the question was yes, no, or maybe. Now, if you're a rugby fan, I think at the very least you answer maybe, because if it's on the telly, the question is, if it's on the telly and you're not doing anything else, would you watch it? And if you're a rugby fan, then of course you'd watch it. So it's a maybe or a yes. I think if you're answering no, then that's a very conscious choice to reject women's rugby outright. And Iain's making for audio listeners, Iain's making a sign that describes how we feel about those people that maybe answered no. And I think you're right. I think if there's the investment, if it's on the telly more people will watch it. There'll be those that make the conscious effort to go, this is a game that's on and I want to sit down and I want to watch it. And there'll be those that go, oh, look, there's this game on. I've got a spare afternoon. I'm going to stick it on. In the same way that people watch, people come across, most people watch the Six Nations. It's on the telly. I'll stick it on. Apart from people that listen to this podcast because they're more invested in rugby. But I do, I agree with you. There needs to be more investment. I think it probably needs to come from the SRU, although potentially it could be matched, I guess, from World Rugby. But then I suppose the argument would be the likes of Spain, who have beaten Scotland in the past. Their union is going to be not have the same funding as Scotland would have.
Yeah, but do we know if they're getting any government funding, or is it maybe Olympic funding? They could be getting money, if they're thinking about putting a sevens team in.
Yeah.
Anyway, what some of the other points? There was a bunch of stuff I was going to comment on there. Was
it the Lions, the women's Lions tour?
Yeah. Oh yeah. If you're not, look, right. See if you say you're not interested in a women's Lions tour, but then you feel the need to reply on Twitter or Facebook that he's like, no, I won't because it's blah 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 because it's just women's rugby. I mean, you're just a bit of a sweary word, aren't you?
Yeah.
Right. Don't answer it. If you're not that interested in watching it, fine, don't. But a lot of us are, and like I've said, Emily Scarrett, there's a lot of fantastic rugby players out there in the women's game. Scarrett, Portia Woodman. For Scotland, I think Hannah Smith, who's Matt Smith's older sister, she's an outstandingly good player.
Yeah.
We've Jade Conkle, who of course is taking a break at the moment.
Rona Lloyd.
Jade Conkle is a sort of groundbreaker for Scottish rugby, first professional Scottish women's rugby player. Rona Lloyd, Chloe Rowley. There are a number of. When I've seen Scotland women's games, most of them have been pretty good. There was a game against Wales where Wales, their set piece, they were just completely dominant in the set piece. So they just churned out penalties. It's like kind of like what Ireland would do to us in the men's game a few years ago. They were just churning out penalties. They even stopped. If they had knock-on advantage, they would just stop playing. It's like, no, we'll take the scrum, then we'll get a penalty out the scrum, then boot it further down the field. So that was I didn't think that was a great advert for the game. But then the week after, Scotland against Japan was fantastic. So if you like rugby, then you want to watch it in all its forms. Fair enough, there might be some crap games, but
I think all its forms is the right point, because I'm not saying that it's men of a certain generation that seem to have these views, but they're also the men of a certain generation who are saying, I don't like how men's international rugby is played now. And I think from the rugby that they want to, I think they're more likely to see the kind of rugby they want to see in the women's game than they are in the modern men's game, because there's a lot more running. It's a lot fast. It's in some ways it's a lot faster because the ball comes out quicker and it goes through the hands, and it's different. And I think that's the other thing to say. Right? It's different. You can't really compare them because physically it's different. I don't mean that it's inferior in any way. It's just different.
Yeah, it's not like you can, Scotland with a penalty, Helen Nelson's not going to thump 160 metres down at the corner.
Yeah.
It's like it's like you say, it's different in the way that heavyweight boxing is different to featherweight boxing. It's just it's the same sport. It's just kind of played out in a different style.
Yeah.
And I would recommend. I mean, because there is massive mismatches. You even get that in men's World Cup, right?
Yeah.
But and there is massive mismatches at times. But when you actually get a good game, like a fiercely contested game of women's rugby, it's up there with what the men can do. Really, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. Yeah, well, exactly. I've never. The games are perfectly entertaining, and anybody that likes rugby would enjoy. Would enjoy it. So, the other bits of news then, Embra have signed a hooker from Ulster who's got a Scottish grandmother.
So not just his mum that's free Glasgow.
Is it his mum? I thought it was his grandma. So look, it's Adam McBurney's been signed from Ulster on an unspecified period of time. So I'm assuming 3 years if we're applying our Richard Cockrell rule of contract. He's definitely Scottish qualified, but I can't. It might just be his mum. I thought it was his I thought it was a grandparent.
I've got the media release here. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah. Oh wait, whose grandmother was from? His grandma from Cather in Lanarkshire.
There you go.
No, Codder would be L. Is that north or that must be North Lanarkshire? I don't know where Cather is.
We don't care.
I'm from the south.
Are we bothered about the European Champions and Challenge Cup last 16s being announced?
We covered that last week, I think.
I know. I think. They've announced the dates. They've announced the dates. I think you covered the fixtures, but they've announced the dates. So Embra are playing Racing on the 4th of April, and
when are Glasgow playing?
Glasgow are playing Montpellier on the 2nd of April.
Second. Oh man, right, my birthday's the 3rd, so I'm in between. I think I should buy WrestleMania again this year, just cause.
Would you WrestleMania the game or?
No, WrestleMania the event.
Buy the whole event.
Yeah, because despite the fact we've tried to get Drew McIntyre on here and he's dinged this swine, and then he goes running off to Rugby World like the wee whore that he is. I've nearly made Cammy spit juice out there, by the way. I've bought WrestleMania a couple of times on pay-per-view here.
I see. No, I thought you meant you were going to buy the entire franchise. I was going to.
Oh man, how rich do you think I am?
I was going to say, you said I'm going to buy WrestleMania.
I'm Eddie Jones's Doug. That's a rich. I've saved up all my treats. Yeah, I've saved up all my treats, and that's me. I'm just going to say, Vince McMahon. Yeah, like Big Eddie's giving me this. I'll trade you 10,000 tins of caviar Caesar for the WWE.
Other bits of news, I think Xander Ferguson's back in the Scotland squad after serving his 4-match ban. Was it 3 matches in the end, wasn't it? 3-match ban, but he had
4.
It was 4 because he showed
4 weeks, 3
4,
matches.
yeah, the way that they work it out.
No, he's not, is he?
4-match suspension. Yeah,
But
the 4-match suspension.
But he was meant to be suspended for the France match, which then didn't happen. So
but a Glasgow game did happen.
So they swapped in.
So Glasgow games.
They swapped in the Ospreys game, didn't they?
They did, yes. And Glasgow played in the rest week as well, and technically he was available for that. Yeah. So he's complete, and then there's Ireland this week.
That's the weird thing, because Hastings counted for the Zebra game, but then he didn't count for the Ospreys game because he might have been playing against Ireland.
But presumably the Ireland game then would count. Who knows? Is it some sort of computer algorithm that works this out?
Because the Ospreys game was a Friday night, and I did start writing a match report on that, then didn't finish it. I got distracted. And then, because Ireland was Sunday, they said that he was going to play in one or the other, so they wouldn't count both of them.
Right.
Because he'd been called up to Scotland squad and then got suspended. So then they said, right, you can't play against either Ospreys or Ireland, and that only counts as one game. That
makes sense. So Zander's back. Damien Hoyland's been added to, and Ali Miller have been added to the training squad. Scott Cummings has dropped out of it altogether because it looks like he's fractured his hand. Is that the suspected fracture? Was the last we heard? I don't think we've had an update on that, have we?
No. I think. Have I checked in for? Yeah, I should be getting notified about the team announcement call soon. So we can ask Gregor Townsend then. But I mean, it looked. I mean, I thought it looked more like a shoulder injury the way he was walking off.
Yeah.
Apparently, as a hand issue. Also, Johnny Gray's got a shoulder problem.
There was Rob Baxter has updated on that and said it looks like it's a bruise rather than anything serious. I've
heard otherwise, but I can't say what.
Right. Well, there we go. And Finn Russell, I think just because of the return to play protocols and because it's 6-day turnaround, unless he's passed his HI, which I don't think he would have done, otherwise he returned to the field, is unlikely to feature because he'll miss it by a day.
Yeah, but that would be a major concern if it wasn't for the fact we're playing Italy, who have been rank wrong.
So we'll come on to them later on. Jamie Dobie's been called up, as has I think Rufus McLean has been called up as well.
Oh, they were called up last week.
Were they?
Yeah, Dobie, McLean.
Have they been actively added back in again? Because this, I'm reading the most recent kind of squad update, and they've made a
Well,
maybe he was released.
There, I believe Skinner has not been released back again.
No. So Skinner's
a wise choice.
Yeah, well, I think he probably should have been on the bench this weekend, but we might come on to that in a minute. We'll get on to the Italy game. We've put it off long enough. I think we'll probably talk about the Ireland game now. We're 25 minutes in. So Scotland, Ireland. I watched it back today. It wasn't as bad as I thought it was on first viewing, if I'm honest. There was mistakes, and the lineup was absolutely shocking. But I think if it hadn't been for the line out misfiring, that I think that's essentially why we lost the game. You take the referee in out of it, but when you've got no attacking platform, then and an attacking platform that our entire game plan is based on, which is kicking to touch and stretching defenses by getting the ball in behind them, then the whole game plan falls apart. Having said that, to only lose by 3 points when the line-out's misfiring shows that we're doing something right.
Yeah, but the line-out was just a complete disaster.
Yeah.
I mean, right, you can maybe excuse the first couple, but then we got a really good attacking position. We won in Ireland's 22, and it got overthrown. So it's not a case of right. Fair enough. You could try and blame the hooker for everything, but then maybe it's missed calls here and there. But if you're overthrowing, that's on you. That's on the hooker.
But I think at that point, was it not that at that point it was completely gone? The line-out had gone by that point when the overthrow happened. So that's kind of a mental thing, I think, rather than a communication thing, that you just completely lost confidence.
And then the next penalty is when Finn Russell decided to go for the sticks, whereas, because Scotland had the upper hand at that point, the game had broken up and we were starting to dominate. I would say 8 times out of 10 that goes to the corner. But just because of how bad the line had been going, Finn opts for the sticks and pushed it wide.
Yeah.
But no, seeing as how good it had worked against England, I think Turner was 100% on his throws, wasn't he?
Yep.
Fair enough. Like, Johnny Gray took a shoulder knock early doors, and that might have impeded him slightly in his jumping, but most of the time it was just Ireland read it. And Ireland, the way they picked their squad, you've got Ryan. Who else was it lock? So Ryan and
Ryan and I know it's horrible when that happens. Ryan and Henderson.
Right.
And you had Tag Byrne in the back row as well.
So you've got Ryan, Henderson, and Byrne, who are all 6'5" plus. Henderson and Byrne, they are interchangeable between lock and flanker. Plus, they've got Will Connors in there, who's not a midget. I think he's 6'4". But every time Scotland just seemed to neglect using Jamie Ritchie as a line-out option, and just always went to Johnny Gray or Scott Cummings. And like I said, Johnny Gray took that shoulder knock early doors. Maybe that impacted that, but everything got too obvious. If things aren't going well, you just shorten the line out. You just dart it in the front and then try and play at the back. What was it? I think 1-2 lost 6. Is that right?
I think that's where it ended up. We stole one of theirs, but it's a very poor return given where we are in the England game. The Wales, even
one that we won was scrappy as well.
I mean, the Wales game after Blade Thompson went off, I don't think we'd had a line out actually before he went off, but we were saying, I remember when we did the podcast after that, we were talking about how poor how the line out hadn't fired particularly well against Wales. So I wonder if it's that teams are just reading it.
Well,
and we've always been too obvious.
If we're only going to have 2 options, that's the thing. Like, will we talk Matt Fagerson right now?
Yeah, let's talk Matt Fagerson now.
Right, because I've just been on Twitter there. I've watched it back saying, I mean, this guy is, again, he had a great game. I thought he had a very good game. But one of the issues is he's not a line-out jumper. So, he fits that mould that you want in the Scotland back row, and that he's full of energy and he will barrel through people. Right, fair enough. He's not tall big, but he shoves hard in the same way that Stander and Sam Simmons do. But he's not a line-out jumper that, say, Ryan Wilson was. Ryan Wilson's been, I think, one of Glasgow's best, most prolific line-out receivers this year. But yeah, we just didn't seem to use Ritchie at all. I mean, even when it was Barkley and Watson, you could use John Barkley as a line-out option. Watson's obviously a line-out option. But you're never going to drop Hamish Watson. I thought he was superb. Sorry.
No, he was unbelievable. I mean, I think he took the game a lot to Ireland. He did everything that you want to, that we'd expect of him. He was, and then nabbed that try. I mean, I don't understand why Hamish Watson hasn't become a captain of a side yet. I mean, obviously, it's not something he's striving to do, but it really is the kind of performance that you would want from someone to kind of, taking the game by the scruff of the neck. And he kept Scotland in that almost single-handedly.
I'd even say, vice captain, because he's not a big talker. We've spoken about this before. He's not he's not a big shouty person, but he leads by action. And I think the same way that Jamie Ritchie does. So I think if you made Watson vice captain, people will suck in that energy. I mean, he had no right to finish that try that he scored. I mean, that's a remarkable finish from him.
He suplexed himself.
Yeah, and he'd sat down Ian Henderson beforehand, and that's him. He twisted at Henderson there. And how he's managed to hold on to that and ground it, it's as good as one of those flying, Super Rugby finishes you see into the corner where a winger's toe is just off the ground as he plants it. That's as hard a technique for me, to twist through getting smashed, hold on to the ball and ground it. It's a fantastic finish. Yeah.
I just want to touch on Matt Ferguson because, like you said, you're having an interesting conversation. I don't, and the point you were making is how are people still not convinced by Matt Ferguson? And I struggle to understand that. I don't get why people are still questioning him as Scotland's nailed-on number 8 because he runs hard, he makes tackles. The number of like I think someone replied to your tweet saying the number of carries doesn't matter. It's the meters you make or the average meters you're making with ball in hand. I mean, he carried 11 times. Was it 11 times for 50 meters?
Yeah. Well, I'd also said obviously because he receives full kicks, I wouldn't be too fussed about meters made. But then someone's averaged it out. He makes more meters per carry than Stander and Faletau. And Stander, obviously, as I've said as well, Ferguson will carry a lot because that's what he does. And even if he doesn't get over the gain line, what it does is it means it draws people in, it draws defenders in, and so it leaves space. And when you've got that kind of work rate going about the park, doing all the things that you want from number 8, unless you're also wanting him to start dishing out Louis Piquemol style offloads, you can't have a perfect rugby player.
Yeah.
He's. I can't think of anyone else who would be better in there. Gary Graham came in and just was a penalty machine, in a negative sense. Ryan Wilson, he's more a sort of 6.5, 6-ish player. Fine, he's a line-out option, but he's not going to carry you more than Ferguson will. Bradbury's work rate around the park isn't enough, and Edinburgh even started using it as an emergency lock now. Fine, he carries well, but he's not an 8. So who is better out there? And how can you? If anyone thinks that he isn't the best choice at 8, tell me who is, and tell me what they do better than what Matt Ferguson does.
Yeah. Dougie will come back to line-out option. Dougie says, mission Matt Ferguson aren't brilliant line-out options. How about putting 6'4" Duhan in as a sneaky line-out option? We used to do these trick line-outs in school. We occasionally would have, there was the one I think that went to, was it Tommy Seymour or Matt Scott who took that ball?
There was one Dunbar scored against Ireland.
Dunbar, that was it. Dunbar against Ireland.
And then Hamish Watson did it against South Africa in the autumn series 2018. 18 or 19, I think it was.
There just isn't, like you said, like we said, there's not much variety to the line-out play. I think as soon as you see which way we'll line up, well, it's either going to Cummins or Gray, and as soon as you've got tall players, well, if you've got 3 tall players up against R2, then
averages, you're kind of screwed, aren't you?
Yeah.
You put one of them in front, one at the back, and then have someone challenge it.
I think it's frustrating to see some of the same mistakes creeping again against Ireland. The last big one where the kind of penalty comes from with the Ali Price turnover was just it was Jamie Batty daydreaming and there was the massive gap between him and the ruck. I think it was a tag Burn ran through.
No, it was your man Baird.
Yeah.
Is it Ryan Baird or James Baird?
Yeah.
Leinster boy. But there's a massive gap between Bergman and Batty. I mean, as soon as it get charged down, I didn't even have a look at replay. I'm like, look at that. Where's your blocker? Where's who's there helping Ali Price? Yes, that was. I mean, it probably explains why Bergman and Batty don't play very often, but that was suicidal. Although, I mean, the main thing with Price for me, like, I'm not going to criticise him too harshly on that one, but the penalty he gave away just before the end of the first half, which, put Ireland into a 14-10 lead, that was just stupid. They are not in a good attacking position. They're not going to snipe. That's just daft.
Yeah. He looked a little bit off his game, actually. I don't know if it's just because we've had a month without a game, but there was a couple of times he looked a little bit indecisive. He almost looked like Ali Price from a few seasons ago, where a lot of people kind of recall, I think, when they're critical of Ali Price, and we've said that he's not that player anymore, he's moved on. But there was one point where he went to pass down the blind side and then thought better of it and changed his mind and passed the other way. But by that point, that's 3 seconds, which is more than enough for the Irish defence to get up. So he just didn't look as sharp as he has done in the last 2 games.
Well, I don't know as well if maybe Itoje charging him down repeatedly at Twickenham is affecting him. But he seems to play a very different way with Scotland than he does for Glasgow. Right, fair enough, we saw the wee chip kick through for Darcy Graham, but he doesn't seem as adventurous. And obviously, it's a different setting, it's a different standard of game, so he probably does feel he has to rein it in a wee bit. But I thought he wasn't good. I'd give him a 4 out of 10. 5 at a push.
Yeah, 5.
Yeah,
I think if we're doing our normal rating, which would be that everyone starts on a 5 if you lose and starts on a 6 if you win. I suppose he loses point. I guess by the time he loses points for not getting Jamie Batty in the right position and giving away that penalty, right, he probably is a 4.
Yeah, and so that's a sort of 6-point concession, which eventually cost you. I mean, obviously it's not the whole narrative for the match, but I don't think he added much zip. He didn't seem to have much about him for the rest of the game. His box kicking wasn't. I don't think he kicked that often, to be fair.
No, and that's but I wonder whether that's kind of when the lineup's not going particularly well, then why try? Because if you kick up even if you kind of box kicking along the line, you're always taking the chance someone's going to knock it into touch or be knocked into touch. Well, what's the point if you're going to lose the line out anyway?
Yeah, we were guaranteeing position turnover.
It then just kind of changes absolutely everything. He was slow. When I'm looking at the ruck recycle speed, so normally he's between 0 to 6 seconds. So normally speed's quite high. But there's 16% of the ruck recycle were 6+ seconds.
See, one thing I've noticed, particularly James Ryan is canny about, is that when an Ireland tackle leaves the breakdown area, right? So they can't get pinged for rolling away because they leave the breakdown area. What they do is they leave very slowly and to one side. So it blocks off. It blocks off an attacking opportunity or like a chance to. I mean, you could be cynical and try and launch it into him and go, "Oh, look, that's him lying on the wrong side." But that's one thing. Like, this is what we always say. Ireland have more street smarts than we do. Will we talk about Roman Poit right now?
Shall we? I mean,
how can you give that a try?
I don't understand. I don't understand why you go to the TMO for Hamish Watson's try when your on-field decision is try because and he says, it's a try because I saw it touch the ground. But you don't go to the TMO for the Ireland try when you had to stick your head in a pile of bodies to see that it hit the floor. By which point, even if it's on the floor at that point, exactly. Then it's a double movement. So I don't understand why you would go to it for one try and not the other. And then just his positioning as a referee when he got absolutely smashed a couple of times during the game. It's just
times.
It's like some sort of Clouseau-esque referee's performance.
So we'll probably get people going, "Oh, you can't criticise referees, blah blah. It's a tough job." Here's the thing, though: that man is crap at his job. He has been repeatedly crap at his job. Even last week, when he was sitting in the TMO's office, he missed a blatant try for Ian Henderson. Right? Mm-hmm. If you're crap at your job, you should not be at your job.
And there was one point as well where it was, and Jamie Ritchie complained about it, and the Irish tackle hadn't moved away, and Scotland got pinged for a penalty, even though I think Jamie Ritchie was being held on the floor. So, there was the decisions were baffling at times, and I think I think that's where it comes down to where I still have hope. And I don't think you can be hard on Scotland for all the mistakes that they made and the fact that the lineup didn't fire, but the Roman Poit's performance had a massive influence on the outcome of that game. That Ireland try doesn't get allowed, then, and I know you can't say that because you never know what would have happened after that and momentum shifts and all of that, but I think his performance gave Ireland 7 points they ought not to have had.
Yeah, and it's been a constant issue with him. When Greg Laidlaw called him out a couple of years ago for it, people said it was uncalled for. It was like, oh, that's not how a captain should behave. But when somebody is so prolifically bad, I think you should call them out. When I saw somebody. It was an Irish person who made a compilation of calls that Poit had missed in that game, and there was a bunch of Scotland, especially the substitutes coming in from the side at rucks.
Mm-hmm.
But the stuff he's missed, like the Omani elbow drop, how is that not called? Just a bunch of things that he
and how would you lose the P from your whistle in the middle of a game?
Well, because he was...
God, have some respect for yourself. Good God.
He just got himself stuck. It's like, he got himself in the way. He apologised. I heard him apologise like 4 times to players because he'd got in the way. It's like, dude, you're in the way of... Surely, as the man closest to the middle of the pitch, you can see what way that the team with the ball are want to play. Stop getting in the road.
Mm-hmm.
I just think he's
and then when that thing where the ball had clearly bounced in field. I know when they showed it on the replay, it looked like I was baffled watching live. I was like, no, that's bounced. That's bounced in field. Like even though we were on a wide angle, I can see that's bounced in field. And the touch judge called it as well and said, no, that's gone out. And it was only when they caught it on a big screen replay that they called them back for the line out.
That's one thing you can actually credit Poit for, because the touch judge had given that out, but it was clearly in. Yeah. I think that was Piardi, who's the Italian ref at the Glasgow game the other week, and he's not very good. I think, why can't we get decent referees?
I did enjoy though Roman Poit's little chat with Johnny Sexton, where he was like a parent trying to calm down a distraught toddler. He's like, Johnny, don't be scared. Don't be scared, Johnny. Johnny, don't be scared.
Hug Uncle Roman.
It is okay. There are no monsters under your bed, Johnny.
It is only Josh Strauss.
Yeah. But I think, you look at it and you think there's at least 7 points difference that his decisions made to the game. So I think if you're looking for hope as a Scotland fan, I think overall Scotland played badly given the position that we ended up with, where you had, Stuart Hogg at 10 and, Scott Steele packing down in thing.
What a job he did.
I know. Well, before we go on, we did. Iain managed to catch up with Mike Blair earlier on to ask him about Scott Steele, and here's what we had to say.
So Scott Steele, obviously due to all the injuries that you had, Scott Steele ended up packing down at open side. What instructions did you send him out with?
Push in the scrum. Like the great thing about Scott is, like, Scott's a brilliant guy. Like, 3 caps, 1 in the wing, 1 in 9, 1 in the back row. Well, that'd be a trivia question to come, I'm sure. But like, he actually suited the role. Like, he was brilliant when I don't know if you saw the stats in him, but I mean he must have cleared out about 12 breakdowns. His energy was great. He was trying to avoid carrying the ball close to their line. He doesn't quite have the size of others, but like he was putting everything into it, and I thought he did a brilliant job. And they actually mentioned that his scrum technique was really good as well. So I don't know, back in my day, if I'd been asked to go in the back row, I think I might have suggested that wasn't the best idea, but Scott did great.
So I've temporarily lost Iain. There he is. He's back.
Sorry, I was on the move.
You're on the move, so he's back. But I mean, he did do apart from binding on Jamie Batty's arse at one point. He did a reasonable job.
That's like when he was called up to the squad, it was because they said they thought he's one of the best defensive 9s kicking about, and he loves a jackal. And because Hornita was injured, it was between him and Sam Hidalgo-Klein. But he's a strong little boy. And I like Mike Blair said, he did a fantastic job. When I asked the question, I was more thinking like, did you ask him to play? Was he meant to be playing open side, or what exactly was he meant to do after scrummaging? But no, he's.
And it was that thing, like I said, he's obviously a smart player, because like Mike Blair was saying there, that he knew not to take the ball into contact close to the line, but he was still there supporting as, latching on to players and protecting the ball, which is, what they needed in terms of an extra body.
Aye. They've asked him to play everywhere.
Yeah. Has he actually come on at 9 yet?
Yeah, against England.
Oh, so he did, yeah.
Yeah, and he seems to. I noted he has this kind of strange box kicking technique where he rotates himself around about 90 degrees and almost like kicks it behind himself. It's quite a strange technique, but it will get you height on it, and also prevents someone like Maro Itoje stretching over and slapping a ball at your hand. So it's canny. He looks like a good player. I'd like to see more of him.
Yeah.
Maybe not at 7, but
yeah, I don't think he'd want to see himself at 7 anymore. There was some interesting. I think when the team was named, it was strange not to have. There was 2 omissions. I think one is obviously Sam Skinner was probably the big omission in favour of Grant Gilchrist. And I was thinking to myself, I wonder if having Skinner on there would have made any difference. But I think it's quite unfortunate to lose both your locks in the way that Scotland did. So I'm not. I think even if you'd had Skinner on the bench, I'm not sure what else you could have done to have avoided having to put your substitute scrum half on in the back row.
Yeah, but I mean, when you've lost, like Richie and Gray had already gone off.
Mm-hmm.
Gray had been obviously carrying on injury for a good while, and then Cummings has to go off straight after Gilchrist and Haney have come on, unless you go on for a 6-2 bench split, which I don't approve of, because, well, then who would, when Russell goes off? Well, that was one thing I'd asked opinions about last week. If you've got no 10 cover, and so it is, Boglet comes in. But yeah, I mean, it just shows the professional nature of Test rugby and the fact that you have to have versatility on the bench.
Mhm.
You look at Hugh Jones, who'd been the auxiliary fullback, winger, centre at 23 over the last couple of weeks. Then he gets shifted up to number 22, and we ended up needing him. And what a fantastic try that was he scored.
Oh, I know.
That was
Unbelievable.
classic Hugh Jones.
Yeah, just the run to cut two defenders in two and just keep running really strongly and just shake off tacklers. It was good. It's good to see him getting back into the form that he was in. I thought he really he played really well. I don't think he's done enough to kind of shift Harris from the 13th shirt, but he's pushing him close now.
No, we know what Harris brings, and we know that Hugh Jones is a different kind of animal, and it'll be really. I mean, I'm sorry to see him go from Glasgow because he's never been given a fair crack at the whip, in my opinion. And if he ends up playing in France D2, if he's going to be on as expected, and they're currently bottom of the league, that's not great. But no, he showed what he can do as an attacking outlet. But I mean, do we shift Harris? I thought Sam Johnson had a pretty good game.
Yeah.
Again, he had that kind of direct running style, which led to Hugh Jones's try when he took that quick tap off Ali Price. There is nobody better in the 12 shirt than Sam Johnson, I think, at the moment, other than Cammy Redpath, but he's injured.
Yeah, and he's not coming back. So I don't. Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't know who you'd. Lang's okay. He's decent, but I think Sam Johnson offers. If you're not, if you haven't got Cammy Redpath, then there isn't really any other option at 12 that gives you that kicking option. And so,
I'd say it's more a runner option, like because Lang's not a runner, whereas Johnson can barrel through you.
Yeah,
Redpath's more of a smooth runner. But just Lang was so anonymous against Wales. He did nothing apart from get elbowed in the throat by Liam Williams.
I think I said that. I think that's the thing with Lang is he's all right. He's good. He can come in and hold his own at that level, but he's not going to break tackles in the same way as Sam Johnson will. So Sam Johnson's always going to start ahead of him. Cammy Redpath had one spectacular game against England. I'd like to see more of him. I don't want to get carried away until he's had a few more games under his belt.
No, but it's the way of the Scottish rugby fan. We get carried away.
That's it. And Hutchinson.
He should be starting at 10, I tell you.
Yeah. I mean, people obviously are excited to have him come in and play 12. And it's a difficult year, I think, because we don't have the luxury of having a big squad and calling players in. And for some reason or other, Sam Skinner has talked about the fact he was asked to go away and work on things by Gregor Townsend. We can only assume that Hutchinson's been asked to do the same, and that there's something that with his game that not that Townsend doesn't like, but thinks needs to work before he gets called in as part of someone that could walk straight into 23.
Although, I mean, I once heard an interview with David Denton for last year, when he'd been called by Townsend. He was told to go and work away on certain things. I think defensively in particular. Then these next two games, he had better defensive stats, and Townsend still said, "Nah, I didn't like the way you played that last game. But you said to work on my defence." I don't know. Yeah, never mind.
Yeah. So we'll see, but I mean, he's not in the squad, and
no,
it's a Schrodinger's cat of an issue, isn't it? You can say you want your favorite player in the squad as much as you want, but we can't know how much better he'd do than the other player until he's in there.
And then eventually, once your favourite player does get called into the squad, and you're like, fantastic, that's that player called into the squad, they mess something up and make you look like an absolute arsepiece.
Exactly. Brody Duncan is suggesting Hugh Jones to 12. I think that's madness. I don't think we should ever repeat that experiment ever again.
No, he's not much of a passer.
Mhm.
And he's not got a good enough kicking game. See, this is one thing, like, see when Hogg moved to 10, and it's one thing that I do quite like about Hogg at 10 is that if he stands flat to the gain line, he can dance past people. And so it's just going to terrify defenders. And then if he goes deep and they drop off, he nearly has an educated enough boot to be able to chip over the top. But it's more effective if it seemed like Ireland. I noticed this a couple of times. They want to rush up and try and hit you, and he can just step in or out. That's one of the great things about Hogg.
I
prefer him obviously at fullback.
No, I prefer him at fullback. I wouldn't be adverse, as much as I'm anti-Hogg at 10. I wouldn't be adverse to him starting there against Italy, to be honest. Because
the sort of experiment.
Just why not? Do you know what I mean? It's a free roll of the dice. If Townsend's going to pursue a route where Hogg covering at 10 is an option, then why not give him 60 minutes there?
So how far away from a Duncan Weir recall are we?
Well, Jaco van der Walt, I think, is fit, isn't he?
Yeah, but he apparently had a bit of an ankle injury. Which I know that I ruled him out of the France game, and then he was picked to start against Edinburgh.
So he's back in the squad.
But I thought it quite telling that he wasn't picked last week.
Yes. So I don't know whether or not that's. But I suppose it's probably just down to the bench option then, isn't it? That by not picking him, then Townsend was able to have Darcy Graham and Hugh Jones.
But then,
because otherwise you would have to drop. Probably you'd end up dropping Darcy Graham for Jaco van der Walt, and then you've got. I don't know. I just don't know that you. I think you got to play. He's left him on the bench before now. In the last, against England, he left him on the bench. So if it's a player you're never going to put on the field, then why waste a bench spot on him?
Well, because the unfortunate happened and Finn went down. Yeah,
but then if you're happy with your fallback, as Hogg to 10.
If you're happy with your fullback as a fallback,
your fallback, then that's fine. If you're happy rejigging everybody else, then why waste? I think from his point of view, why waste a bench spot if you're not going to bring the player on? And I'm not saying that Townsend, before Edinburgh fans get upset, I'm not saying Townsend's right or wrong to have left him on the bench. I'm merely suggesting that if he's not minded to bring him on, if it's a break glass in case of emergency replacement, then you're wasting a bench spot.
Because Hugh Jones and Darcy Graham are better than Jaco van der Walt.
Yeah. I think that's I don't think you can argue that. They're more likely to change. Are they more likely to change a game from the bench than Jaco van der Walt? Yes. In which case, you might as well, if you've got 10 cover on the pitch, you're fine. I don't know who would have been the third choice 10 after that, but
well, usually it'd be Hogg, as we saw with Finn Russell and Hastings.
God knows what would have happened after that.
How much more annoying is Adam Hastings' red card now at this moment in time?
Yeah.
Like, oh, you stupid. I mean, I thought it was harsh, but at the same time, you're just like, dickhead, don't even give them the choice.
No.
Are you going to have to blank out D-head? It should be fine.
It'll be fine. I'll just gloss over it.
Gloss over what? Exactly.
Yeah. What any more on the Ireland game? I don't think it's as bad as people are making it. I don't think Scott Steele and the Courier's column for Gregor Townsend said, I don't think we're there. I don't think it's that bad.
No, I think you're right. Now, Townsend, after getting school by on a couple of times, has learned. I think we can, you take the Open Nations Cup game out of the equation because that wasn't a proper match because he had the options available. He dropped Hamish Watson just to test things out. And now we know you don't drop Hamish Watson.
No.
We should have won that game, but it wasn't Townsend's coaching that made Ali Price jump offside. It wasn't Gregor Townsend's coaching that made Jamie Batty miss that hole to block the box kick. It wasn't Gregor Townsend that saw, a massive reshuffle and the sort of in the back five and then also the back row, and even then at that point we managed to claw it back, and we managed to score a short range try against Ireland, which is a bit of an anomaly.
Unbelievable.
So yeah, even though this has now dropped his win percentage just under Vern Cotter's, no, we should not sack Townsend right now. Or if we are going to, please, apart from Scott Robertson, don't suggest anyone else.
The interest, I was looking back at Scotland's scores just to try and prove a theory, and I've partially proved it. It was like confirmation bias. I'm fitting the facts to fit my view. But apart from Ireland, Scotland haven't lost by more than 7 points in a while. I think France in February 2019 was 27-10. And then beyond that, it's mostly said there's more, apart from Ireland then in the World Cup. And again, Ireland in the autumn. All Scotland's other losses have been by 7 points or less.
Which proves they're very competitive against the best nations in the world.
Yep.
Apart from bloody Ireland and Johnny Sexton. I can't wait for that ass style.
I think if you looked at if you did a graph over the last few years of Scotland's wins and losses, the wiggly line of the number of points when it comes to us losing is overall its arc is getting smaller. We're closing the gap in that we're not losing as badly to these teams.
Still losing, but
we're still losing, and that's the thing.
You want the W.
You do want the W, but I'd rather we were coming to within a score and being largely competitive than losing by 10, 15 points every game.
And we've not lost Italy for 6 years now, so that's...
There we go.
Yeah. Have I just jinxed this weekend?
It'd be quite something to lose to Italy this weekend. I think that probably would be it for Gregor Townsend.
You just commit Harakiri right there.
There's a suggestion that the France game might not go ahead. This has come from Rob Baxter.
I mean, this is an absolute debacle from the Six Nations.
It hasn't still. I thought it had been confirmed, but it turns out it hasn't. Nobody knows it's been confirmed yet.
Just poop or get off the pot. I hope you appreciate that. I went for the polite term there.
Yeah. But yeah, so this is this Rob Baxter interview where he was talking about Johnny Gray's bruised shoulder, where he said that he still hasn't heard whether or not he's going to have Scottish players available that weekend, that the France game is scheduled to go ahead. And he's waiting to hear what the English Premiership have agreed in terms of player release. Gregor Townsend, I think, has recently said as well that he's not 100% sure exactly what's happening. Rob Baxter seemed to be intimating, although he said he didn't know anything, but intimating that, well, if Wales win this weekend, then Scotland-France is kind of a dead rubber anyway, aside from prize money, I guess, because I think prize money is divvied out depending on your final end position.
Mm-hmm.
So aside from that...
There's TV revenue as well.
Depending on final... Well, I suppose for the game going ahead, isn't it?
Yeah, yep. Yeah, so unless Rob Baxter can convince Tony Rowe to cough up for the short end, the shortfall. Yeah, no, I think it's an absolute joke. This still hasn't been clarified. How France have got away with it when they are solely to blame is kind of beyond me. When we've seen teams punished, including the Glasgow Warriors, teams punished for nothing when they've done absolutely nothing wrong.
And Glasgow, that was Exeter's fault.
Yep, that was Exeter's fault, and then we had to cancel a game against was it Leon? I think it was Leon. And so Leon get given a 28-0 win because Glasgow can't put a team out because of another team's faults.
If we're saying it's Exeter's fault, we need to put the woke klaxon on, though. Everything's Exeter's fault.
Well, I was going to say, could like Tony Rowe maybe not show a bit of decency, and every penny he's made from Native American merchandise, all the profits, they can go to the teams who.
Yeah, I think the problem. I think the moment you carried on speaking after, could Tony Rowe not show a bit of decency? I think.
Yeah,
didn't see anything after that.
All became moot after that. Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
but yeah, it's weird. It's unbelievable that it's still not been sorted at this stage. That we essentially everyone's believed it's confirmed just because the French press say it has been. So Italy this weekend. Who knows after that? We'll see.
Not even the Six Nations, apparently.
Only the French press knows. We'll move on. We'll move on from the weekend's rugby. We'll do this now. Yes, it's Hands in the Ruck time. It's our Any Other Business section of the podcast. Iain, while I go and look on Twitter for the Hands in the Ruck we had submitted, what was your Hands in the Ruck this week?
Mine is that, well, you may have to stick the woke klaxon on again here, but I really don't think.
No, it's fine. No, it's allowed. It's allowed in Hands in the Ruck. That's why we've got the woke klaxon for wokeness outside of Hands in the Ruck.
Oh, we've not even had time for a Lions chat and all sorts of crap. But Guinness Premiership Rugby highlighting Paddy Jackson's successful penalty kick, which is the longest penalty kick of the season. In particular, on the day after the vigil/protest, the Women Reclaim the Streets sort of protest that happened when the police were beating up women. Unless you've had your head under a rock for a while, you might have heard about how Paddy Jackson thinks about women or treats about women, right? So fair enough, right? He wasn't convicted. He was found. Sorry, he was found not guilty.
Not guilty. Nobody is found innocent in a court of law. You are found guilty or not guilty.
Not guilty. But
and he was found not guilty to the criminal standard of proof, not the civil standard of proof, which are two different things as well.
Yes, which is, for example, why OJ hasn't been put in a chair, but instead got sued by the Nicole Richie estate for something like $16 million.
Yep.
They basically own all of his stuff. He even owned the rights to a book he brought out, which was called
How I Did It. It's called OJ Simpson, How I Did It.
Yeah, so, his title was I Didn't Do It, but This Is How I Would Have Done It. So they just because they owned the rights to that, they just changed the font on the bits that made it sort of like I didn't do it.
It was called If I Did It.
Yeah,
Confessions of the Killer.
Yes, and he did. And so their Premiership Rugby's glorification of Paddy Jackson, and then also, as per usual, we've had the brigade out giving it but he's found not guilty in a court of law, and many various horrendous slurs aimed at the women who made the claim or who raised the lawsuit.
What I think is worth saying is if the text messages and the details of what happened are in the public domain, and you can go and read them, and the court released those, and so it's if before commenting on it and on you know, how wonderful a human being you believe Paddy Jackson to be or not, go and read those and then come to a view, yes, he was found not guilty in a court of law, and so he is a free man. That's fine. And he is allowed to be on a rugby pitch, but people are allowed to be unhappy that he's on a rugby pitch. London Irish are allowed to employ him. People are allowed to be unhappy that he's employed by London Irish. That's how the world works.
See, one thing that now I believe, you know, when someone goes to jail or whatever, if they're convicted of a crime, you know, I believe in rehabilitation. I believe you should be given second chances and stuff like that. But the fact of the matter is, since his conviction, Paddy Jackson has shown little contrition. You know, maybe if he'd spearheaded campaigns to try and stop this laddish culture that pervades in sports clubs, that'd be cool. You know, he seemed quite contrite when he said his statement at the end, but it just sounded like you're contrite because you've been caught. I mean, I think if you truly want to change as a person and want to try and make the world a better place, if you've been caught out for doing something shady like he did, because regardless of whether or not he was convicted, as you've said, the text messages that are available in the public domain are abhorrent and show little respect for not even just women, just humans in general. Yeah, and then he's been given a chance to come back too quickly. You know, I think
it's the kind of, like you said, it's the celebrating of him. I think that's what sticks in the craw a little bit. Is, you know, he's London Irish entitled to have him as a player, and he's entitled to play and earn a living, and that's fair enough. But I think it's then the kind of veneration of him, like you said, in the context of what's happening in the world right now, that's very difficult. And I think it's, you know, I get that sports commentators and, you know, need to create excitement around games, but they also maybe just need to show a little bit of awareness. And it's, you know, they don't have to hold them up as being the, you know, there's people calling for him to get back in the Ireland team, for Christ's sake. It's, I mean, that's not happening. Well, you'd hope it wouldn't happen, but
it's up to them.
Yeah.
You know, like I said, if we've not seen enough contrition or any kind of look to redeem himself from or admission, you know. If I think if he sort of held his hands up and went, look, here's, I mean, obviously he's not going to admit to, you know, he's not going to incriminate himself, but look, here's what happened, or here's my events of what happened, or just going, this is why we shouldn't behave like this. If we are, you know, any age group of men, particularly young men like him who find themselves in a financially privileged position and who know they are in positions of power, they should be using that. They should be, you know, setting examples. They should be going out there to be like, I'm not just some daft wee punk who goes around doing despicable acts and getting pissed.
Yeah,
you know, you set yourself standard.
Yeah, and I don't think he did any interviews where he joined. You know, when he joined London Irish, that was the time for him to, you know, come out on record and say, "I've been away, I've been playing in France, and I've had some time to reflect on my behaviour. It wasn't acceptable, and blah blah blah. I've learned, and you know, all the rest of it." But I don't think that didn't happen. They've just wrapped him in cotton wool and kept him away from the press, I think, pretty much.
That's one other thing I've said to a sort of fan called Izzy, who I think we both follow on Twitter.
Yeah.
She's been complaining about the veneration of Paddy Jackson. Les Kiss knew about the allegations before Paddy Jackson even did. Les Kiss called Paddy Jackson into Ulster Rugby Club because I think the police had contacted Ulster Rugby Club. Les Kiss then signed Paddy Jackson after his little year in exile to bring him back to the UK. So Les Kiss has obviously he was in charge of these guys. He was in charge of Paddy Jackson and Stuart Olding, and there's another player who still plays there, whose only named is CG in the messages released. You can guess who he might be. He's a winger. So, he's in charge of all these people, and he knows their attitudes, and then he's been at the epicenter of this crap show, which has brought massive disrespect on his club and on the Irish Rugby Union. And then less than a year later, once he's left the Irish Rugby Union, he brings Paddy Jackson back in. He goes, oh no, he's a good player. He doesn't think about the kind of person Paddy Jackson is. He just goes, oh wait, I could use him as a player. That to me says quite a lot about Les Kiss.
Did you know, I didn't realise this, but Paddy Jackson's lawyers threatened to sue Rory Best for libel.
F off.
Because, because he said, I think he said he regretted taking part in the trial because he spoke in I think he stood as a character witness. Ultimately, didn't give evidence at the trial, but he agreed to appear in court with Ian Henderson, and he expressed regret for attending the trial, saying it turned into a circus and it put a lot more pressure on something that was very sensitive. And they have. He also said I did not really. He also said I did not really understand the complexity of the situation. I was strung up.
Yeah, I was stonewalled into it.
Yeah, but yeah, they've issued defamation. They issued defamation proceedings against him. Madness. Yeah.
So my brother's a lawyer, and he knows it. I think he's scum. No, he's a decent lawyer. I think I've said this magnificent joke before on here. What have a lawyer and a sperm got in common?
I don't know.
1 in 4 million of them have a chance of becoming a human being.
The old ones are the best.
They are proper dad joke.
We've got a Hands in the Ruck from Peter. This is not Peter Foster on one of our patrons. Says not Hands in the Ruck. It's an Any Other Business one. Found out that Kenny Logan has got a 15-year-old son who's 6'5" tall and has signed for Wasps. I hope Kenny's having a word in his ear about it. And Dougie Lowe then pointed out to be able to play for Scotland, England, and Wales because, of course, Gabby Logan's dad was Terry Yorath, who turned out for Wales.
Well, I hope Kenny Logan's son won't be doing the kicking if Kenny's international record is anything like the guy. Even though he seemed to be prolific for Wasps.
He was, but he never, yeah. And then Chris Patterson came on the scene and all was right with the world.
Yes. And I was in Wales at the time when it happened, watching Scotland v Wales. That was a good day. I was so drunk.
The other Hands in the Ruck we've had is from Ran Clanald, who says he's been thinking about the trajectory Scotland have been on and the questions that have been raised again about Tooney's role. The classic take is our problem of inconsistency, but it strikes me that it's something more intangible than that, something almost to do with jamminess. Ian pointed out after the Wales game how we're always on the wrong side of close calls and tight, brave performances. The 2015 Australia game or the autumn game against Ireland with Taylor's yellow. Against England, Tunis had a stellar record but has never beaten Ireland. There's something about certain teams we need to be able to crack if we have to have any hope of progress, especially with them being in our pool at the World Cup. Apologies, this may be a bit of a ramble. I think there's something in. I mean, Ireland of Gregor Townsend's bogey team, but then the Irish teams were maybe his bogey teams during the time he was with Glasgow.
Well, I think what would really effing well help is if Roman Platt is not refereeing Scotland Ireland games, because that's it almost seems like a bit of a piss take now, because Greg Laidlaw complained about it. We've had him 2 out of 3, not as the main man, not just running the line, but as the main man.
Was he in charge of the World Cup match, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was in charge of the World Cup match, but he wasn't in charge of the Autumn Nations Cup match.
Nations Cup.
Then
wasn't he on the? Was he part of the? Was he not part of the referee team during the Autumn Nations Cup?
I don't know who. No, it was Carly. Was it Carly? Or Brace was in the middle.
Yeah.
Who sent up? Who yellow carded Duncan Taylor? That was Carly, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think he was. I don't think he was running the line. But
No, but he has been.
he probably wouldn't have been allowed. Like France would have said he couldn't leave the country at that point. Although I don't think he should be allowed to leave the country at any stage.
It's always a friend. Matthew Reynal was in charge of the 2026 Nations one.
Yeah, Reynal is Reynal's
what we need is a non-French referee. That's the secret to.
I can handle Gozer and Garces. Gozer and Garces aren't too bad.
Yeah,
but Platt and Reynal are wastes of oxygen.
Yeah. We've not had any other hands. My hands in the ruck was CJ Stander retiring because it just seems odd. And I get maybe he has had the epiphany he says he is, but I did kind of take Dan Leo's point that he then subsequently deleted, where he said, kind of a player like that going and earning his residency then and retiring and immediately moving back to his country, his home country, does kind of, the optics of that aren't great. And also that's somehow worse than what the Pacific Islands are calling for, which is that people should be able to play for more than one nation after a stand-down period.
With the latter point, I certainly agree that people like Charles Piutau and that should be allowed to represent or represent places like Tonga and Samoa. Because I mean, I don't want to say they get corralled to playing for the All Blacks, but if they're wanting to earn their coin in New Zealand, because they can't earn their coin in Tonga or whatever, but then it's like you can't be an international unless you play for the All Blacks if you play New Zealand. Which I think there's some kind of I know that Ireland, Wales, England, and France have similar kind of agreements in place, but I wonder if that's some kind of. I mean, we're not.
It's like a monopoly, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's kind of like you're trying to stop people from being able to trade their wares.
Yeah. It's true, and I think as well. There's the other. We've talked about this before, but it's the other thing. If it then helps develop tier 2 nations, if someone can go back and who's no longer wanted by the nation that they were selected for originally, hasn't had a cap in years, it then helps the developing nation to have someone like that come in, and it's not going to turn them into, it's not going to turn Tonga or Samoa into, world beaters overnight. It just will help the players that are there to have somebody that's better available to them.
So it's not like the All Blacks dinghied Sonny Bill after he went to play rugby league.
Yeah.
But in the case of Stander, Stander has been in Ireland for years and years, and he seems
but he should be forced to. He should be forced to live in Limerick for at least 5 years before he's allowed to go back to South Africa.
I don't know. I think there's maybe. I think there's family issues. It would be like us criticising Jake Ball or Dave Rennie, or you can criticise Dave Rennie for other things, but not for the fact that he wanted to get closer to home because he was his family, and so I don't think we can criticise Stan for that. And I know Dan Leo, he followed that up with a tweet saying, "Look, I don't think that, I'm not saying Stander's made a mockery of the game. He's been dealt the hand. He's been played, but it's more to do with the fact that guys like Charles Piutau and what have you, they can't go back and represent our countries, which used to be, even in the 90s and that, it was the case. You had someone like Jamie Salmon who played for New Zealand and England. Even sort of more recently, I don't think it was in the same code, but someone like Robbie Paul, who played for Australia at Rugby League and then England at Rugby Union.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I think the sit down period should be allowed. as should the residency period. We just have to accept that the world has moved on. People move about. It's so much easier to move about. Well, apart from in the last year or so, because we're all spreading disease about the shop. Otherwise.
Yeah, Denny Solomona, he's the other one. Played for Rugby League for Samoa, and then now he's playing for England at Rugby Union.
And you look at the Scotland Rugby League team, half of them are have been
Australian,
capped for England or Australia, and then it was like, I'm not getting capped by England anymore. I'm Scottish.
Don't you
Scottish as a tatty scone, mate.
Don't you talk down Danny Brough?
I love Danny Brough.
Danny Brough. I don't Danny Brough ever. I think he's played for Great Britain, but I don't think. I think he's only ever played for Scotland. Outside that, I don't think he played for England. Is he Danny Brough?
I don't know. I think I'm not that much of a league fan, mate. I don't
Scottish through and through is Danny Brough.
Aye.
Oh yeah, he got one. He played one game for England.
Scottish through and through. I drink Nambarry.
That's probably it for this week. Don't think we've got anything more to add. We'll be hopefully going to try and do an Only Fins match preview if we can work out who's available. I think teams get announced tomorrow, Iain. Is that right? You're on the team call. Is it tomorrow or Friday?
I've not had an email yet. Hang on.
It'll be Thursday or Friday.
You keep talking for a couple of seconds. I
think the teams are the games are on the games on Saturday, so we're recording this on Wednesday evening, so probably going to be on Thursday. The teams are normally announced on the Thursday.
Week ahead schedule. Here we go.
There we go. Ian's going to double check that for us. By the time you're listening to this, the teams will be announced.
Yeah, 1:30 tomorrow.
So we've got tomorrow afternoon, Dougie Lowe says, and Ian's just confirmed that. So 1:30 tomorrow, Ian will be on the call, and we'll have coverage of the team announcement on the blog. So
the team should be up about 12:45.
Aye. So and we'll see if we can fit in an Only Fins for patrons as well, where we'll talk about the two lineups. Although it's only Italy, that'll come and bite me on the bum next week. We'll be back next week with a post Italy, maybe a France preview. Who knows? We'll see if that game is actually happening after the weekend. For the moment, though, it is goodbye from me and goodbye from Iain.
Ciao.